U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is refusing to attend the G20 summit in South Africa later this month as a row over a new land law deepens. President Trump threatened to withdraw aid from the country. He spoke to reporters before boarding Air Force One.
Terrible things are happening in South Africa. The leadership is doing some terrible things, horrible things. So that's under investigation right now. We'll make a determination.
And South African ministers have hit back, threatening to withhold vital minerals from the U.S. But is this an empty threat?
We have minerals in the continent, and therefore we have something that we have. We're not just beggars, but we must just use that endowment for our benefit as a continent.
President Ramaphosa used part of his State of the Nation address on Thursday to intervene on the dispute.
We will not be deterred. We are, as South Africans, a resilient people, and we will not be bullied.
On today's podcast, we'll look at how South Africa has ended up on the U.S. president's radar and how the new administration's foreign policy could have repercussions across the continent. I'm Jennifer Zabasajja, and this is the Next Africa podcast. We're going to be speaking to political commentator Justice Malala in a bit. But first, we have Bloomberg's deputy managing editor, Neil Munshi, joining us. So, Neil, thanks as always for coming back onto the podcast. President Trump is now taking aim at a new South African expropriation law. Get to the heart of this dispute. What exactly is this row over?
It seems like a misinterpretation, let's say, of what the law actually is, which is South Africa passed what is essentially an eminent domain law, which countries all over the world have, where the government can take over unused land, abandoned land, that kind of thing, if it's not being used and can be used by the government for something else, right? That happens all the time when countries want to lay pipelines or build infrastructure, that kind of stuff. Now, the context in South Africa is a little bit different because one goal of the African National Congress, which is Nelson Mandela's party that brought down apartheid, is to redress the inequalities born from the apartheid era. The vast racial wealth gap, all that kind of stuff. It seems like what Trump is doing is conflating the two in a way. And in his tweet about it, he objects to the South African government treating, quote, certain classes of people very badly. Secretary of State Rubio also mentioned the seizure of land. There is no seizure of land, but that seems to feed into this long-running conspiracy theory that the South African government is seizing land from white farmers.
Which brings me to one of Trump's closest advisors, of course, Elon Musk, who is from South Africa, Pretoria man, as many people refer to him. Where does he fit into this? Is he potentially the one whispering in the president's ear about what's going on? I mean, what have his comments been?
So Musk has for years now trafficked in this racist conspiracy theory about the black majority South African government either seizing land from white farmers or committing a so-called white genocide against white people in the country. None of this stuff is happening, but he has repeatedly raised this specter or on Twitter or X, commented on other people's faux outrage about the South African government doing terrible things to white people in the country. It all kind of fits into the broader anti-DEI kind of racial grievance politics that Trump and Musk are bringing to the U.S. government right now.
What's at stake, Neil, if this bilateral relationship falls apart?
So the U.S. is South Africa's top trading partner. Most of that is minerals that go to private companies. It'd be hard for the Trump administration to stop companies from buying, coal or diamonds or gold or anything else. But I think what the last couple weeks has taught the world is you never kind of want to be in Trump's sights because he can make things very uncomfortable for you as a government, your country, without sort of any thought to the broader context. That is going to be particularly tricky for South Africa, given Elon Musk's relationship with Trump and his history with this conspiracy theory. and the fact that they are the head of the G20 this year. They're hosting the presidency and the summits. Already Rubio has said he won't come. We don't know about Treasury Secretary Bessent coming at the end of February. And then, of course, in November is the Leaders Summit, which Trump in the past has attended, but given his focus on this kind of issue, non-issue, that's also up in the air.
Well, let's turn now to Justice Malala and bring him in, political commentator and also a Bloomberg opinion columnist. I wonder if you can give us your take on how this row is playing out and how it even reached President Trump's desk.
I have no doubt, Jen, that the way to President Trump's ear has been through Elon Musk and a cohort of other former South Africans who have become very close to the Make America Great Again cohort, who are hugely, hugely influential on him, who can whisper in his ear and say, this is a concern, and it becomes his concern without even stop to think it through. And you can go back to Peter Thiel, who's a major donor of the president, the new crypto czar, David Sachs, is one of those, and others. I'm not saying in this case it was through those channels. The thing to realize now, and for South African policymakers, is that it's going to be a very Trump-centric 4 years for South Africa because they are in the sidelines of this administration. Add to that people like the media, the journalist Tucker Carlson, who has made this issue of land in South Africa a bugbear of his, and he talks about it again and again. My view is that those people already are looking at South Africa and are looking at it askance. If I were to reference Marco Rubio about in October last year, even before the election, was already saying South Africa is making, and I want to quote, a grave mistake by listening to China on the Taiwan issue, for example, wrongly or rightly. This is an administration that is looking very, very seriously at South Africa and is looking at it punitively. So I expect that this is not the last we've heard of Donald Trump and others on South Africa.
And of course, it's not the best time for the country, right? You mentioned the G20. South Africa is set to be the first African country to host a G20 later this year. This week, when this post came out from President Trump, there was a big mining conference that was going on. It's the week of the State of the Nation with this new government here in South Africa. So not an opportune time. And also, South Africa, as we've talked about, has been caught in the crosshairs for the case they brought against Israel, right? And so how do you expect the South African authorities and leaders to respond? Do you continue to see this being, a tense dispute between these two countries?
Yes, I think it's going to be very tense. As you rightly say, the focus of the world over the next 12 months will be on South Africa, right through to November when the G20 leaders arrive in Johannesburg. And so for South Africa, which has a whole range of things, you talk about the new government of national unity. When Cyril Ramaphosa and his team were in Davos last month, people were all over them saying, you guys have done an amazing thing. You've managed to pull together the ANC, the opposition, 8 smaller parties into a 10-party coalition. People worry about the stability of that coalition. And so you've got a jittery market already around South Africa. And then you add to this an unprovoked attack from the most powerful politician in the world. It becomes a huge issue for South Africa. How should South Africa respond? How is it responding? The context is that you have this loud voice. I'm pulling South Africa from funding from South Africa. But actually, how much is it? How big is it? And when you look at the numbers, they are not that scary or that big. South Africa is feeling what a huge chunk of the world, Mexico, Canada, China, to a lesser extent, is feeling. And that's the Trump effect of being shouted at and then saying, okay, where's the meat? But the meat is, I don't know where the meat is. It's all very thin soup.
So, Justice, you're walking us through the scenario in which South Africa has now found itself in. Given where things are at now, what is President Ramaphosa to do? And I mean, is it better to sort of sit on the sidelines and wait for this to play out? Is it better to, respond? And I wonder how then other African countries should game it.
I think a lot of us, Jen, who look at these things have always said Africa needs to shape its own agenda. It needs to say, this is what we need. This is what we've got. What do we have at the negotiating table? I don't think this attack on South Africa by Donald Trump and members of his administration is any different to the way South Africa should be acting and responding to threats or overtures from China, from Russia, from the UAE, Turkey, other players on the continent, other jurisdictions which want to participate and play on the continent. I think Cyril Ramaphosa, in a South Africa specific sense, has done the right thing. He's gone out of his way. He said, this is how much we're getting. This is what we're doing. He's called Elon Musk and said, let's have a conversation about misinformation and disinformation on your platform by yourself, because Elon Musk has made these claims himself. And so I think that's the first step. But the key thing here is what the minerals minister in South Africa has responded with, saying, well, we are endowed with mineral wealth. The United States and others need us. And so we will consider how we respond in that manner. I don't think that that's the card that Cyril Ramaphosa himself is playing. If you take South African exports to the United States, if you take manganese, South Africa is home to 70% of the world's manganese. So this is a country that has a lot to give, a lot to trade with the United States. Does the United States, on the basis of this crisis that it has manufactured itself, want to get into this sort of thing with South Africa? I think not. So one might say, and you and I have followed Minister Mantashe of South Africa. He's a very flamboyant, very voluble individual. And you'd say, it's just noise that he's making. But he's onto something. And I think many Africans are saying, well, what are we dealing with here? Why are we continuing to act as if we are begging?